This is a secret you were never meant to hear. Beneath the soil of a forgotten farm in Missouri lies a truth so grotesque, so corrosive to everything you believe about medicine, morality, and history, that even the state tried to erase it. Tonight, I'm going to take you there, into the shadows of the Endecott farm, where healing and horror became indistinguishable. They said it began with fire. An accident, a simple tragedy. That was the official story. But if you dig even an inch beneath the official narrative, the mask slips, and what you see is not just a burned farmhouse, but a theatre of human suffering designed with precision. In the autumn of 1876, railroad workers stumbled upon bones, rows of them. 17 human skeletons laid out as if they were part of some grim order. But these were not simple burials. Each body was missing parts, femurs, ribs, even skulls, sliced away with the accuracy of a surgeon, as though human remains were ingredients carefully selected from a recipe. Alongside those bodies, workers uncovered brass medical instruments, the kind used not just for healing, but for dissecting and extracting, and a journal bound in leather, its ink still legible, words that would make even the hardened soldier tremble. Inside were references to something called therapeutic anthropophagy. To strip away the academic polish, it was cannibalism disguised as medicine, a theory that consuming the flesh of the broken might restore the health of the living. That journal belonged to Dr. Cornelius Endecott, a man trained at Harvard, once celebrated as a war surgeon, a man who had stood on battlefields knee-deep in blood and infection. He had the pedigree, the knowledge, the connections. And yet, in the ruins of America's most devastating war, when the nation was broken and desperate for cures, physical, mental, spiritual, he used his prestige as a shield to experiment it on men who trusted him. Veterans, scarred inside and out, came seeking relief. What they found was a farm that became their tomb, and a doctor who believed himself ordained to cut, consume, and reconfigure the human body as though it were clay in his hands. This isn't just a tale of one deranged man. This is the story of how institutions protect their own, how official seals and bureaucratic hands bury truth in plain sight. The state called it a fire, but bones don't lie. 17 souls still whisper in silence, waiting for us to hear what history was forced to forget. You cannot understand the horror of Endecott Farm without first understanding the man himself and the war that transformed him. Cornelius Endecott was not born a butcher. He was born into privilege, son of a Boston family with money and influence, polished through Harvard Medical School, class of 1851. His early colleagues described him as brilliant, precise, almost unnervingly calm, a rising star in the new science of surgery. But war has a way of bending men until they break. In 1861, when the nation tore itself apart, Endecott joined the 14th Massachusetts Infantry as a field surgeon. He entered a world where medicine was not salvation. It was mutilation. Amputations done without anesthetic, buckets filled with limbs, blood soaking into the soil faster than bandages could staunch it. He worked for 3 straight days after the Battle of Antietam, where more than 20,000 men fell. Witnesses said the field hospital looked less like a place of healing and more like a slaughterhouse. And yet, this was where Cornelius changed. Something inside him shifted. While other surgeons were broken by the endless screams, he grew fascinated, obsessed. He kept notes not only on survival, but on the effects of shock, terror, and even what he called the strange resilience of certain tissues. After the war, he spoke less of saving lives and more of unlocking what he called hidden reserves in the human body. 2 years in Europe only deepened this obsession. He studied under German and Swiss doctors experimenting with what they called essence therapies, bizarre treatments that claimed mental trauma could be cured by diet, blood, or secret vital extracts. In letters preserved by the Massachusetts Historical Society, Endecott wrote of reconstruction through consumption, a cryptic phrase that in hindsight reads like prophecy. When he returned to America in 1873, he did not come back to Boston's shining hospitals or prestigious halls. No, he bought a farm, isolated and vast, in the hills of southwestern Missouri. Why? Because here, away from scrutiny, away from the eyes of Harvard and the Boston elite, he could build a laboratory, a theater of healing, or a house of nightmares, depending on how you see it. And here is the truth you must hear. The war had not broken Cornelius Endecott. It had freed him from hesitation, from morality, from the boundaries that separate doctor from butcher. What he saw in the fields of Antietam became the blueprint for his farm. The cries of dying men became the music that scored his experiments. And when he put on the mask of healer again, the men who walked through his gates believed they were stepping into a sanctuary. They were stepping into a trap. Picture the Missouri hills in 1873, scarred by war, haunted by men carrying wounds that could not be stitched. Farms abandoned, towns still smouldering with memory. Into this broken land walked Cornelius Endecott, polished, charming, and carrying promises of a new kind of healing. The property he bought stretched across 320 acres. A grand house sat at its center, rebuilt with whitewashed walls, wide porches, and the air of wealth. To outsiders, it looked like hope incarnate. A private medical retreat for veterans who could afford it. No overcrowded hospitals, no crude army tents. Here, the doctor promised peace, quiet, and revolutionary treatment for what he called nervous afflictions. His wife, Helena, played her role well, soft-spoken, attentive, a nurse with battlefield experience of her own. Their daughter, Margaret, only 18, acted as assistant and secretary. She welcomed patients with warmth, recorded their ailments, handed out tinctures and teas. To the neighbors, they looked like a model family, educated, refined, generous. But those who stayed longer began to notice strange details. Windows in the main house covered with thick shutters, even in summer. Lanterns burning at odd hours of the night. The barn, never used for livestock, locked with heavy chains. Veterans arrived broken in body and spirit. Men who trembled at sudden noises, who woke screaming, who drank themselves numb just to sleep. They came desperate, clutching letters of recommendation, believing Cornelius when he spoke of essence therapies learned in Europe. Some families sent their sons here as a last hope. They believed the farm would give them back what the war had taken. But something was different inside those walls. Patients were kept on strict regimens, measured diets, herbal mixtures, long hours of isolation. Cornelius claimed it was to purge the poisons of memory. Yet many who entered the farm were never seen again. Their families received polite letters. Your son has made great progress, but his treatment requires seclusion. Months would pass, and eventually another letter would arrive, cold and final. Complications arose. He did not survive. Alongside the letter came a bill, always paid in full before questions could be asked. Neighbors began to whisper. Some swore they heard screams drifting on the wind at night, cut short too suddenly. Others saw wagons leaving the barn in the early dawn, carrying covered crates toward the river. The doctor smiled, reassured them, and donated generously to the church. Suspicion dissolved under charm and money. The Endecott farm presented itself as a place of healing, but under its floors, beneath its fields, a secret was growing. A secret the veterans themselves could not escape, because once you entered Cornelius Endecott's sanctuary, you belonged not to medicine, but to his hunger. The barn was the beating heart of the Endecott farm, though no animal ever grazed within it. No horses, no cattle, not even the scratch of chickens. The neighbors assumed it was used for storage. But the patients who lived long enough to glimpse its interior whispered otherwise. Inside, the scent of hay was replaced by something sharper: iron, rot, and smoke. Wooden beams were fitted not with hooks for tools, but with shackles, carefully installed as if designed for men, not beasts. Sawdust lay thick on the floor, not to cushion hooves, but to drink the blood that fell there. This was no barn. It was a theatre of flesh. Cornelius Endecott, with his polished manners and Harvard degree, used it as a laboratory. And what he practiced there was not surgery, as his patients understood it. They were told it was therapeutic extraction, a method to purge the body of trauma, to release their suffering by removing what he called corrupted essence. But the essence he sought was not intangible. It was bone, marrow, blood, flesh. Patients disappeared into the barn for treatments. Some walked in trembling, desperate for relief. They never walked out. Others returned altered, faces hollow, eyes vacant, voices speaking as if from far away. These survivors were placed on liquid diets afterward, but their recovery was temporary. Within weeks, they too vanished. The truth was this. Cornelius believed that human vitality could be transferred through consumption, that a wounded soul could be rebuilt by grafting the strength of another into its body. He called it therapeutic anthropy, a word that sounded medical but carried the stench of ritual. And the farm became his crucible, a place where he refined the process with surgical precision. Helena, his wife, did not merely assist, she recorded everything. Neighbors later recalled seeing her carry leather-bound journals into town, lock-in, them tightly against prying eyes. Margaret, their daughter, was often seen wheeling crates to the river at dawn, her face pale, lips pressed tight, as if she too was bound by a vow of silence. But the barn betrayed them. One night in 1874, a travelling peddler stopped near the farm. Drawn by the faint glow of lanterns inside the barn, he swore he heard screams cut apart by the whir of a bone saw. He told others in hushed tones at the tavern, his voice shaking, insisting he had stumbled upon something unholy. By morning he was gone. No trace, no wagon, no name in local records beyond that brief, drunken warning. The Endecotts had perfected the art of silence. Their victims vanished, their secrets buried deeper. But the barn remained, its doors locked, its walls stained, its rafters echoing with the ghosts of men who came seeking healing, only to be carved into medicine for someone else. The discovery of the journal changed everything. It wasn't just scraps of rumor or faded memory anymore. It was confession, formula, blueprint. Found beneath the rubble of the farmhouse, sealed in wax and wrapped in oilskin, its leather cover was cracked with age but intact. Across the front, in blackened ink, one word bled through the years: anthropy. Inside, the handwriting was precise, steady. Cornelius Endecott's own hand, cataloguing the unthinkable with the detached order of a physician. No hysteria, no rambling, just cold, systematic notes. Each entry read like the minutes of a medical lecture, and that calmness made it all the more horrifying. He described his patients as subjects, never men, never women, subjects. Each one numbered, each one dissected piece by piece. Femurs listed under long bone extractions, ribs under structural marrow trials, skulls tagged for cranial essence experiments. Saw marks aligned with sketches that revealed he had not only cut, but measured, weighed and recorded with the accuracy of a man building equations out of flesh. But worse was what came next. In the margins, Helena's smaller handwriting appeared, cataloguing reactions to the consumption, dosages, recipes. She had recorded how long a tincture of boiled marrow sustained clarity of mind, how strips of dried muscle cured night terrors, how blood, reduced and powdered, restored masculine vigor. These were not the notes of an unwilling accomplice. This was partnership. Then came the symbols. Drawn between paragraphs were strange sigils, half medical diagrams, half occult glyphs, spirals etched into rib cages, geometric carvings mapped across the human spine. The journal revealed that Endecott's work was not simply medicine. It was ritual disguised as surgery. Every cut, every removal, was part of an ancient system he believed could extract the fractured spirit and feed it into another vessel. The most chilling entry was labelled Experiment 46. It read, "Male subject, aged 24, war neurosis advanced, skull opened, frontal lobe removed, tissue consumed by assistant. Result, temperance, reduced nightmares. Transference appears successful. Further tests required. Assistant, not Helena this time, not Cornelius. Margaret, his daughter." Think about that. The Endecotts were not just a family of healers. They were initiates of something older, something darker, a bloodline feeding itself on the broken. And as the journal closed, the final words carved into its back cover whispered a vow that sent chills through every investigator who dared to read it. The essence must never be wasted. What is taken is sacred. What is consumed is eternal. The moment the journal was uncovered, the story should have broken the nation. It should have been on every front page, burned into history as a warning. But it wasn't. Within 48 hours, the truth was locked away. Sheriff Jameson, the first to arrive at the site, later confessed in a drunken outburst that the order came from Jefferson City before the bones were even removed. 17 skeletons, saw marks, instruments, a journal cataloguing cannibal medicine. And yet the official report listed it as a catastrophic farmhouse fire with multiple accidental casualties. Neat, contained, forgettable. But ask yourself, why? Why would the State Medical Board, the Governor's Office, and even military officials from St. Louis move so quickly to suffocate this truth? Because Cornelius Endecott wasn't just a mad doctor. He was part of the system. The man was Harvard-educated, battlefield-decorated, and connected to physicians who were shaping the future of American medicine. If his experiments were exposed, so too would be the cracks in the entire profession. The Civil War had already left medicine with a reputation for barbarity, amputations without anesthesia, deaths from infection, soldiers screaming in makeshift hospitals. To admit that one of their own had crossed the line into ritualized cannibalism would have obliterated what little trust remained. So they buried it. Literally. The skeletons reburied in unmarked graves, the instruments melted down, the journal locked in a restricted archive for medical review only. Every surviving witness was silenced, some bribed, some threatened, some simply disappearing into the endless shadows of post-war Missouri. Even the newspapers played their role. A single article appeared in the Carthage Weekly Banner, describing a tragic fire that claimed the lives of the eccentric Endecott family and their patients. That was it. No mention of saw marks, no mention of missing bones, no mention of the journal. The public swallowed the lie because it was easier, cleaner, less terrifying than the truth. And here is the most sinister part. Endecott's research didn't vanish. Fragments of his theories, his obsession with essence, with transference, with dietary cure, reappear in private medical correspondences well into the early 1900s. His name erased, but his ideas smuggled into lectures, experiments, and the secret foundations of what would become modern psychiatry. Do you see it now? The Endecott farm wasn't a lone aberration. It was a laboratory hidden in plain sight, a prototype of something bigger, something systemic. And the men who sealed the truth weren't protecting the people. They were protecting the institution. consumed the hearts of enemies to absorb their courage. In certain Mayan rites, elites drank the blood of captives to merge with divine memory. Even in medieval Europe, powdered skull was sold in apothecaries as a cure for melancholy. Always the same promise. By consuming the flesh, you are no longer merely yourself. You become something more. Endecott twisted this ancient superstition into pseudoscience. Patients were not simply treated, they were reforged. Imagine a soldier shattered by war, haunted, broken, trembling with nightmares. Endecott would offer him an elixir laced with the marrow of another man, claiming it would stabilize the nerves, strengthen the spirit. And when the patient calmed, whether through placebo or sheer terror, it seemed to work. But the truth is this: what calmed them was not healing. It was submission. To accept the ritual was to surrender. To let another man's identity bleed into yours until you no longer knew where you ended and he began. That is how control works. Not through open chains or shouted orders, but through the silent rewiring of self. To consume flesh was not just to ingest. It was to participate in your own transformation, to become complicit in your own erasure. Do you see why they hid this? Because once you understand this principle, you see it everywhere. Not in blood or bone anymore, but in symbols, media, ideology. Institutions still feed us their essence, not on our tongues, but in our minds. And like the patients of Endecott, most men accept it willingly, believing it will cure their pain. The Endecott farm was not just a house of cannibalism. It was a workshop for a deeper kind of possession. The true horror of the Endecott farm isn't that 17 skeletons were buried beneath its ruins. It's that the principle Cornelius practiced there never ended. It was merely perfected. Think carefully. Endecott believed that by consuming fragments of another human being, you could rewrite the nervous system, fuse memories, even reconstruct identity itself. But in the century that followed, the elite discovered something even more effective. They learned that you don't need to feed a man flesh to consume him. You only need to feed him ideas. Stop for a moment. Look at the world around you. Can you see it? Institutions no longer serve food for the body. They serve food for the mind. Carefully prepared, cut into pieces, disguised as medicine, entertainment, education. You consume, you digest, and slowly, without realizing, you become the thing they want you to be. Ask yourself, how different is that from what Endecott did? His patients were told, drink this elixir, it will heal your trauma. Today we're told, take this pill, it will calm your anxiety. Or watch this screen, it will distract you from the ache inside. But behind both lies the same mechanism, submission through consumption. The farm was a laboratory, but society has become a cathedral of consumption. Every book, every broadcast, every doctrine is marrow ground into tincture, an essence slipped into your bloodstream until your original self dissolves. And the most dangerous part? Men line up willingly. They pay for it. They beg for it. Do you see now why stories like the Endecott curse are buried, dismissed as folklore, branded too macabre for polite history? Because if you recognize what Cornelius was doing, you start recognizing the same ritual everywhere, disguised in higher language, cloaked in science, wrapped in government or corporate seals. Think of the soldiers in 1873, men shattered by war, desperate for healing, blind to the price they were paying. Then think of yourself. Think of how many fragments of other people's voices are already inside you. How much of your identity was truly your own choice, and how much was fed to you since birth, carved into you without your consent. This is what they don't want you to ask. Because once you see the ritual, you cannot unsee it. And the Endecott farm stops being just a house of cannibals in Missouri. It becomes a mirror, reflecting the same machinery still operating around you today. Quieter, cleaner, more efficient, but every bit as consuming. You've heard the whispers, haven't you? that something is eroding you, hollowing you from the inside, and yet you can't point to a knife or a saw or even a hand. That's because the scalpel they use now is invisible. It cuts the mind. Fear, repetition, ritual. These are the three instruments of modern cannibalism. Endecott needed brass medical tools to carve bones. But the architects of today's order? They need only symbols, patterns, and words. First comes fear. It weakens the defenses. The battlefield soldier trembles not from wounds, but from what he imagines might strike next. Endecott knew this. He preyed on broken men who had seen too much blood. Fear opens the gate. And so too in our world, every headline, every broadcast, every sudden crisis gnaws at you, lowering your resistance until you accept any cure they prescribe. Then comes repetition. This is the marrow extraction. If you hear the same thing enough times, your mind doesn't question. It absorbs. The chant, the slogan, the news cycle. Ancient priests used drums. Today's priests use screens. Your thoughts are no longer your own. They're echoes drilled into you until you mistake them for your inner voice. And finally, ritual. Ritual seals the transformation. For Endecott's patients, it was the drinking of tinctures mixed with human bone. For you, it's the repeated gestures you've been taught to perform. Bowing your head to authority. Signing your name on papers you never read. Reciting pledges and slogans in classrooms. Clicking the same icons 1,000 times a day. These are not habits. They are incantations. And each repetition feeds the machine that consumes you. The brilliance of this design is that you never feel the incision. You never hear the bone saw, because the sacrifice is not the body, it is the self, and by the time you realize it, fragments of you are already missing. Just as the skeleton, sits beneath Endecott's farm, bore sore marks and missing pieces, so too does the modern man's psyche, full of gaps, replaced by foreign matter, fed to him through ritual consumption. Now listen closely. Those who designed this system knew exactly what they were doing. They studied history's darkest experiments and made them cleaner, subtler, invisible. But the effect is the same. The farm was not destroyed, it was scaled. The ritual was not abandoned, it was perfected. So I ask you, brother, look at your own reflection. Can you see the missing pieces? The parts of you that were carved away and fed to a system you never agreed to serve. You were never supposed to know this. Even speaking it aloud feels like breaking a seal, like pulling back a curtain woven from silence and blood. But the truth is this: Endecott was not erased. He was absorbed. The official story told to the public was simple: a fire, a tragedy, a family lost, a chapter closed. But beneath that fragile fiction, the records tell another tale. In a locked archive in Boston, fragments of Endecott's correspondence remained hidden until they were unearthed by accident during a library restoration in the 1950s. Letters to men whose names still command respect in medicine, politics, and finance. Letters that spoke of the elixir of resilience, of transference of will through essence. Words that should have been dismissed as madness, but instead were studied. Why? Because Endecott's curse aligned perfectly with what the elites of the time already craved: control. He proved that suffering men could be remade, reshaped, broken, and built again, with enough ritual, enough belief, enough consumption. And while he fed his patients bone broth steeped in ash, those above him fed on something far greater: the dream of populations who obeyed without question. And so the farm was not destroyed. It was buried. The Missouri State Medical Board sealed the case, not because it was too disturbing, but because it was too useful. Witnesses were silenced, families threatened, documents burned, But the ideas, those were preserved, transported, rebranded. Endecott's journals disappear in Missouri, and decades later you find echoes in the writings of government psychiatrists during the wars, in the secret programs that experimented on soldiers, prisoners, and children. Different names, same seed. Here is the suppressed truth they pray you never connect. What began in the basement of a farmhouse became the foundation for entire systems of manipulation. Technicère, quays of breaking the will, replacing the self, and binding identity through fear, repetition, and ritual. Not just medicine, but education, propaganda, and policy. Look around you. The walls of Endecott's farm still stand, but now they are invisible, spread across institutions, digital screens, corporate towers. The hunger remains. The feast continues. Only the table has changed. This is why you were never told the real story of the farm, because once you see it, you begin to recognize its shadow in every modern system of control, and once you see, you cannot unsee. So I'll ask you, when history is buried this deep, when the soil itself has been salted with lies, who do you think benefits? Who eats well while the rest starve in the dark? Do you really think the story of the Endecotts was just about a farm in Missouri? That it ended when the fire consumed the house and left nothing but ash? No. That was the birth cry, not the funeral. Because the techniques tested in that farmhouse, the breaking of will, the binding of the mind through ritual, repetition, and symbolic consumption, did not vanish. They were harvested, studied, repurposed. And what began in secret cellars found its way into the institutions that govern your very thoughts. Let me show you. Endecott wrote of the 3 stages of reclamation: isolation, saturation, reprogramming. First, cut the subject off from familiar patterns, remove them from family, home, or belief. Second, saturate them with controlled inputs, ritual chants, repetitive imagery, substances disguised as medicine. And third, reprogram, implant new truths, new loyalties, new identity. Do you recognize the design? You should, because it became the backbone of modern psychological warfare. Look at the 20th century. Entire governments built mental conditioning programs that mirrored Endecott's formula. First, isolate populations with fear, wars, propaganda, scarcity. Then saturate them with messages, posters, broadcasts, slogans repeated until they felt like truth. Finally, reprogram. Reshape nations into obedient machines that march to orders they didn't even realize had been planted in their minds. And here's the darkest truth. This isn't history. It's happening right now. You are living inside a farm far larger than Missouri. The difference is that you no longer need chains or locked cellars. The cage is built from glowing screens, social contracts, algorithms that feed you exactly what breaks you down and rebuilds you into something predictable. Endecott's bones are gone, but his curse is alive in the way men are tamed. Do you feel it? The numbness, the repetition, the endless cycle of fear and distraction. It's not an accident, it's design. And once you recognize it, you are faced with a choice: remain livestock in their invisible farm, or begin to awaken. But awakening comes with a cost. Because when you see the patterns, you stop belonging to their world. You step outside the pen. And that is the one thing they fear most. Listen carefully now, because from this moment forward, what I'm saying can't be unheard. You've been wandering through this tale of bones and journals, of a farm buried in fire and ash. But here is the truth. You are living in the Endecott farm right now. The walls are not made of timber, but of narratives. The locks are not chains, but beliefs you never questioned. And the ritual? It's happening every day, on the screen you hold in your hands, in the words you scroll through, in the news that tells you who to fear, who to love, who to obey. The same blueprint that was carved into those poor souls in Missouri has simply evolved into something seamless. Isolation, saturation, reprogramming. Do you feel it now? Your isolation isn't in a cellar. It's in the disconnection between your true self and the self they've trained you to project. Your saturation isn't in chance. It's in the infinite stream of carefully engineered images, one after another, until your mind no longer knows what is yours and what is theirs. And the reprogramming? It's the slow, quiet corrosion of your will, until you wake up one day and realize you are living a script someone else wrote. But here's the turning point. The reason you're still here, still listening. Some part of you is resisting. Some part of you knows. That's why you've been drawn down this rabbit hole. You are not here by accident. And so, I will ask you for a symbolic act, not for me, but for you. If you want to break the pattern, if you want to mark the moment your transformation began, go down to the comments right now and write, "I step outside the farm." Write it once, then again, twice. That repetition isn't for the algorithm alone. It's a ritual, a marker, a declaration that you are no longer just consuming this story. You are stepping into the dangerous truth behind it. From here, nothing will feel the same. Because once you name the cage, you can never again pretend you don't see it. The next question is, do you have the courage to walk away from it? This is the moment, the place where most turn away, pretending the horror belonged to another age. But you, still listening, you know better. The farm did not burn to ash. It only changed form. The Endecotts were not an accident of madness. They were a prototype, a test, a glimpse of a darker order hiding behind the curtain of respectability. Cornelius Endecott wrapped his rituals in the language of medicine, of science, of healing. Do you think that pattern ever ended? Or did it evolve into institutions, into systems, into the very structures we are told to trust? Look carefully. How many wars have been sold as cures for peace? How many drugs pushed as salvation only enslaved? How many leaders smiled while feeding on the lives of those who followed? The Endecotts may have butchered 17 souls in a cellar, but their spiritual heirs have learned to feast on millions without leaving a trace of blood. The farm is not in Missouri anymore. The farm is global, and if you listen closely, you can still hear the same chant, a rhythm of control, a hunger for submission, a ritual of power fed by silence. You were never supposed to know this. That's why the truth was buried under ash, under official reports, under carefully edited history books. But the bones were found. The journals survived. And now you've carried this story inside you, line by line, revelation by revelation. So now you face a choice. Will you close this video and let the walls of the farm rebuild themselves around you? Or will you carry this darkness like a torch, dangerous but illuminating, capable of guiding you out of the cage? Because here is the truth. Once you've heard the chant, once you've felt the farm closing in, you can never return to blindness. You can ignore it, deny it, bury it beneath distraction. But in the silent hours of the night, you will hear it. The scratching of bones beneath, with the floorboards, the whisper of voices asking if you belong to yourself, or if you are still being consumed. The Endecotts are gone, but their curse is not. It is alive in every hidden hand that feeds on the blind obedience of men. And now it is alive in you, because you know,